They thought it was just an ancient tomb until his dog started digging and uncovered something that was never meant to be opened. Caleb Turner didn't come to the mountains looking for answers. He came to disappear. No noise, no people, just silence, and a dog that never left his side. But on the first night, Bruno didn't bark at the woods. He fixated on the ground. And what he found beneath that soil wasn't history. It was something sealed, something waiting, something that should never have been opened. Before we go deeper, drop a quick comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. The first thing Caleb Turner noticed wasn't the cold. It was the silence. Wyoming nights had a way of swallowing sound whole. No traffic, no distant voices. Just wind threading through the pine trees like a long, low whisper. The kind of quiet that pressed against your ears until your own breathing started to feel too loud. Caleb lay flat on his back in the narrow bed, eyes open, staring into the dark ceiling of the cabin. He hadn't meant to fall asleep. 1 second he'd been sitting in the old chair by the window, boots still on, watching the last gray light bleed out of the mountains. The next, rotor wash. A hard chopping thrum slammed through his head. He snapped upright. The knife was already in his hand. He didn't remember grabbing it. His chest rose fast, shallow, muscles tight. Every sense stretched thin, listening, waiting. The sound wasn't there anymore. No rotor, no shouting, no radio chatter cutting through static. Just wind. Just the cabin. Caleb stayed still for a long moment, knife held low. Blade angled instinctively toward the door. His eyes moved. Not his head. Corners first. Window. Table. Door frame. Clear. He exhaled slowly. But it didn't settle anything inside him. It never did. A soft sound broke the quiet. Scratching. Caleb froze. Not inside. Outside. It came again. Faint. Uneven. Claw against dirt. A dry, repetitive drag. He turned his head toward the door, every nerve tightening again. But this time slower, controlled. He swung his legs off the bed without a sound and moved across the floor, placing each step carefully, rolling heel to toe out of habit. Another scratch. Closer now. He reached the door and paused, listening. No footsteps, no voices, just that same sound. Scrape. Scrape. He eased the latch back, opened the door just enough to look through the gap. Cold air rushed in. And there, just beyond the threshold, Bruno. The German shepherd stood in the dim wash of moonlight, his broad back still, head low. His front paws worked the ground in short, sharp motions, dirt shifting beneath him. He didn't look up, didn't react to the door, just kept digging. Caleb opened the door wider. Bruno. The dog didn't stop. That alone was wrong. Bruno always stopped. Caleb stepped out onto the wooden porch, boots silent against the planks. The cold hit his face, sharp and clean, the kind that should have woken him fully. It didn't. Bruno's claws scraped again, faster now. Dirt scattered behind him in small bursts. Caleb watched him for a second longer, eyes narrowing. Something in the dog's posture didn't fit. This wasn't excitement. It was not the usual restless energy when Bruno chased scent or tracked something through the trees. This was focused, tight, like he'd locked onto something he couldn't let go. Caleb moved down the steps and onto the hard ground. The gravel shifted slightly under his weight, crunching just enough to make Bruno's ears twitch. But the dog still didn't turn. Hey. Caleb's voice came out low and steady. Bruno paused. For half a second. Then his paws went back to work. Caleb stopped a few feet behind him, watching. The dog wasn't digging randomly. Same spot. Same narrow circle. Again and again. Caleb crouched, one knee lowering into the dirt. He reached out, resting a hand lightly against Bruno's side. The dog's muscles were tight under his palm. Not fear, not exactly. Something closer to urgency. Bruno finally turned his head, and their eyes met. And for a brief moment, the dog didn't look like he usually did. There was no question in it. No waiting for a command. Just a quiet insistence. Caleb followed the dog's gaze. Down, Not toward the trees. Not toward the ridge beyond the cabin. Straight down at the ground. Caleb shifted his weight and brushed away some of the loose dirt with his hand. Cold, colder than it should have been. He frowned slightly, running his fingers over the surface beneath the top layer of soil. It wasn't just dirt. There was something else there. Packed, solid. Bruno let out a low sound. Not a bark, not a growl. Something in between. A warning. Caleb's hand stilled. The wind picked up, moving through the trees behind them. The sound rolled down the slope, a long, hollow breath across the mountainside. But for a split second, it wasn't wind. It was something else. A memory trying to break through. Radio static. A voice shouting coordinates. Hold position. Hold. Caleb blinked hard. The sound vanished. Just wind again. Just trees. He dragged a slow breath in through his nose, grounding himself in the cold air. Wyoming. Not Kandahar. No LZ. No contact. Just him and the dog. Bruno shifted again, stepping back from the hole just enough to give Caleb space. But he didn't leave. He stayed close. Watching. Waiting. Caleb reached forward again, brushing more dirt aside. The soil gave way easily this time. Loose, where Bruno had been working. And beneath it, something flat. His fingers slid across it. Stone. Smooth. Too smooth. Caleb pulled his hand back slightly, staring down at the spot. The wind moved again, but softer now. Behind him, the forest stood still, dark and unmoving. Nothing out there. Nothing coming, but something here, right under his hand. Bruno stepped closer, pressing his shoulder lightly against Caleb's arm. Not pushing, not pulling, just there. Caleb looked at him, then back at the ground. The dog wasn't digging a hole. He wasn't chasing anything. He wasn't trying to get out. He was trying to get in. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly as he reached for the shovel leaning against the side of the cabin. Metal scraped softly as he dragged it across the ground. He drove the blade into the dirt beside the spot Bruno had cleared. The soil broke easier than expected. Too easy. Each push of the shovel peeled back more earth, exposing more of the flat surface beneath. Not rock, not natural, something placed there. And Caleb worked in silence. Steady, methodical. No wasted movement. No rush. Bruno circled once, then settled just off to the side, eyes never leaving the ground. The hole widened, deepened, and the shape beneath became clearer. A slab, perfectly flat, edges too straight, buried, waiting. Caleb stopped. The shovel hovered in his hands for a second before he lowered it slowly. He crouched again, brushing the last of the dirt away with his fingers. The stone was colder now, not just from the night air, from something else, something that didn't belong. Bruno let out that same low sound again. Caleb didn't look at him this time. He was staring at the slab, at the line running along one edge, a seam, barely visible. But there. His grip tightened slightly. The wind died down completely. The forest went still. No movement. No sound. Caleb swallowed once, then spoke under his breath. That's not just a rock. Bruno didn't move. Didn't blink. Caleb's hand hovered over the seam, just above the stone. He didn't touch it again. Not yet. Because something in him, something older than training, older than instinct, was already telling him this wasn't just buried, it was sealed. And for a long second in that frozen silence, Caleb understood one thing clearly. The dog wasn't digging for something, he had found it. And whatever it was, it had been waiting down there long before Caleb ever set foot on that mountain. The wind returned in a sudden rush through the trees, carrying a low, hollow sound across the dark. Bruno's ears snapped back. Caleb's head lifted. Both of them turned slightly, but not toward the forest or toward the ground, right where the stone lay beneath their feet. And this time, neither of them moved. Because the feeling wasn't curiosity anymore. It was something else, something colder. Something that didn't belong to the mountain. And it was still down there, waiting. For the first time in years, Caleb didn't reach for his knife. He just stared at the ground and listened. Because whatever Bruno had found, It wasn't finished. Not yet. Caleb didn't touch the stone again that night. He stood there longer than he meant to, eyes fixed on that thin seam cutting across the slab. The wind came and went in low waves, brushing the trees, then fading back into stillness. Each time it moved, it felt like something shifting just out of sight. Bruno didn't lie down, didn't relax. He stayed close to Caleb's side, his body angled toward the ground as if guarding it. Caleb finally stepped back. "Inside," he said quietly. Bruno didn't move. Caleb waited. A second passed. Then another. The dog turned his head slowly, looking up at him, then back at the slab. Reluctant. That was new. Caleb's jaw tightened just slightly. He gave a small motion with his hand. "Inside." This time Bruno obeyed. But he didn't take his eyes off the ground until the cabin door shut behind them. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat in the chair by the window again. The same place he'd been before everything shifted. The knife lay on the table within reach, blade angled toward him. The cabin creaked quietly with the temperature drop. Bruno lay near the door, but not fully at ease. Every so often, his ears flicked, his head lifting just enough to listen, and Caleb watched the darkness outside. That spot. He could still see it in his head. The shape of the stone, the line along the edge. Not natural, not random. Placed, buried, sealed. His fingers flexed slightly against the arm of the chair. He'd seen things buried before. Caches. Weapons. Bodies. But this felt different. No pattern he recognized. No reason he could name. Just wrong. A gust of wind rattled the loose edge of the roof. For a split second, static. "Turner, we've got movement." Caleb's head snapped slightly, eyes hardening. Nothing. Just the cabin again. Just Wyoming. He dragged a breath in, slow, controlled. Bruno lifted his head, watching him. Caleb didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The dog settled again, but not fully. Neither of them did. Morning came sharp and clean. Just the kind of mountain light that made everything look too clear. Caleb stepped outside with a shovel in one hand and a crowbar in the other. Bruno was already waiting near the spot. Same position, same focus. Like he hadn't moved all night. Caleb paused at the edge of the porch, scanning the tree line first. Old habit, left ridge, right ridge, break in the trees, shadows between trunks. Nothing moved. No tracks he could see from here. No sign anyone had been close. Still, something in him didn't settle. He stepped down into the yard. Bruno shifted as he approached, stepping back just enough to give him room, but not far. Never far. Caleb crouched again and brushed the remaining dirt from the slab. Now that the light hit it properly, the surface looked even more out of place. Too smooth. Too even. And the edges weren't rough like natural rock. They were clean, cut, deliberate. Caleb ran his fingers along the seam again. This time, he pressed. Nothing. He switched to the crowbar, sliding the tip into the narrow line. It barely fit. He adjusted the angle, applying a little pressure. The metal gave a faint scrape against stone. Caleb froze, listening. Nothing answered. No echo from below, no shift. Just that same heavy silence. He leaned his weight into the bar. The seam didn't move, not even a fraction. Caleb exhaled through his nose. "Yeah," he muttered under his breath. "Figured." Bruno stepped closer, nose hovering near the edge of the slab, but he didn't touch it, didn't sniff it the way he usually would. He just hovered, watching. Caleb pulled the bar free and set it aside. Then he grabbed the shovel again. If it wasn't going to open, he'd uncover it, see the full shape. He worked around the edges, cutting a wider circle in the dirt. The soil gave way faster than it should have, loose, disturbed, not packed like ground that had been untouched for years. Caleb noticed it halfway through the second pass. He stopped, looked down at the dirt, then out across the clearing, then back at the hole. Someone had dug here before, not recently, but not ancient either. The layers didn't lie right. He shifted position, scraping more carefully now, peeling back thin sections instead of driving straight down, and then he saw it, a faint line running out from under the slab. Not part of the stone, something else. He brushed it clean. Wood. Old. darkened with age. A fragment, barely visible, and disappearing under the edge of the slab. Caleb leaned closer. The shape wasn't random. It looked worn, like something had been dragged across it over and over. A track. His shoulders tightened. Bruno let out a low, uneasy breath. Caleb followed the line with his fingers, tracing it until it vanished beneath the stone. He sat back slowly on his heels. "Something came through here," he said quietly. Bruno's ears flicked. The dog's eyes didn't leave the slab. Caleb glanced toward the forest again. Still nothing. But now the silence felt different. Heavier. Like it was holding something back. He pushed to his feet and grabbed the shovel again. Working faster now. Clearing more of the perimeter. The full outline began to show. Not just a slab. A door. Rectangular. Too precise to be anything else. Along one side, a deeper groove appeared. A hinge line. Caleb stopped digging. The shovel slipped from his hand and landed softly in the dirt. He stared at it, at the shape, at the realization settling into place. "This isn't just covering something," he said under his breath. Bruno shifted, stepping back another inch. His tail stayed low, not tucked but close. Caleb's gaze hardened slightly. "Someone put this here." The words didn't echo. They just hung there. Flat. Final. Bruno made that same sound again. Low. Tight. Almost a warning. Caleb didn't move. His eyes traced the edges again. Measured distance. Weight. Entry point. His mind started working the way it used to. Angles, approach, risk. Clear or not clear. He crouched again and leaned close to the seam. There was something else there. Faint and barely visible. He brushed away a thin layer of dust. And then he saw it. Marks. Not scratches, not natural cracks. Carvings. Worn down but still there. Symbols. He couldn't read them, didn't recognize them. But they weren't random. They repeated. Patterned. Deliberate. Bruno took one more step back. Just one. Enough for Caleb to notice. He glanced at the dog. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I see it." The wind picked up again. Stronger this time, pushing through the trees with a long, rising sound. For a moment, it felt like something breathing under the ground. Caleb's hand hovered over the carvings. He didn't touch them. Not yet. He straightened slowly, eyes still locked on the slab, on the door. Because now he knew. Whatever this was, it wasn't just buried. It had been built. And whatever had been built like this was meant to stay closed. Behind him, Bruno turned his head toward the forest suddenly, ears snapping forward. Caleb followed the movement instantly. His body shifted, stance tightening, listening, waiting. There, a sound, faint, far off. Not wind, not animal, something else. Caleb's eyes narrowed. The mountain wasn't empty anymore. And for the first time since he arrived, he wasn't the only one who knew about what was buried beneath his land. Caleb didn't move right away. He stayed where he was, half crouched beside the exposed stone, eyes fixed on the tree line where the sound had come from. It hadn't been loud, just enough. A shift, a break in rhythm, something that didn't belong to wind or animal. Bruno stood rigid now, body angled toward the same direction. His ears forward, breath slow and controlled. Not barking. Not charging. Watching. That was worse. Caleb rose slowly, every motion deliberate. His right hand drifted, not to the shovel this time, but to the knife at his belt. He didn't draw it. Not yet. He stepped away from the slab, boots pressing into the disturbed soil, and moved a few paces out into the open clearing. The forest ahead looked the same as it had yesterday. Tall pines, long shadows, no movement. But Caleb knew better than to trust stillness. Stillness lied. He scanned left to right, eyes tracking along the base of the trees, then higher, checking branches, breaks in silhouette. Nothing. He took another step forward. Gravel shifted underfoot. Too loud. He stopped, listened. Nothing answered back. Behind him, Bruno didn't follow, but Caleb glanced over his shoulder. The dog had stayed by the hole. Not guarding Caleb, guarding the ground. Caleb looked back toward the trees again, Yeah, he muttered quietly. We'll get to that. He turned and walked back toward the cabin, instead. Not retreating, repositioning. Inside, he moved faster. Drawer open. Flashlight. Old radio dead. But habit said check. A pair of gloves. He paused at the table, staring at the knife for half a second. Then he picked it up and slid it into his waistband. When he stepped back outside, Bruno hadn't moved. Same position, same focus. Caleb didn't speak. He moved past the dog, this time circling wide around the clearing instead of heading straight toward the trees. Flank, always flank. If someone was out there watching, they'd expect him to come straight. He didn't. Now, the ground dipped slightly as he moved along the edge of the property. Pine needles softened his steps, swallowing sound. He slowed as he neared the line where trees thickened. And then he saw it. Not movement, not a person, a disturbance. Low, near the ground, he crouched, bringing the flashlight up, but not turning it on yet. Daylight was enough. There, a faint impression in the dirt between roots. Not animal, too long, too even, a boot print, old, but not old enough. The edges hadn't fully collapsed. Caleb's eyes hardened slightly. He scanned again. Then he saw another, and another, a path, leading toward his cabin, then stopping, not retreating, just gone, like whoever made them had stepped off the earth. Caleb stayed crouched for a moment longer, breathing slow, counting, listening. Nothing. No branch snap, no shift of weight. Just wind moving high above, never touching the ground. He stood again and backed away the same way he came. No sudden turns, no rushing. When he returned to the clearing, Bruno finally moved. The dog stepped toward him, pressing briefly against his leg, then turning back toward the slab. Like a reminder, Caleb looked down at the exposed stone, then back at the tree line. Yeah, he said quietly. We're not done. That night came faster than he expected. Or maybe it just felt that way. Caleb didn't touch the slab again. Not after the prints. Not after the sound. He covered it, loosely. Just enough dirt to hide the sharp edges of the excavation. But not enough to lose the spot. Temporary concealment. Nothing more. Inside the cabin, the air felt tighter, smaller. Now, the walls creaked with the drop in temperature. Bruno paced once, twice, then settled near the door again. But this time, he didn't lie down fully, half alert, waiting. Caleb sat in the chair again, the same position as the night before. Boots on, knife within reach. The flashlight rested on his knee, thumb brushing the switch now and then without turning it on. Outside, the wind had died completely. No sound at all. That was worse than before. Silence like that didn't belong in the mountains. His eyes drifted toward the door, toward the ground beyond it, toward the thing buried just a few feet away. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. And then, a sound. Not outside, inside his head. Rotor wash again. Louder this time. Closer. Turner. Move. Move. Caleb was on his feet before the thought finished. Now, the chair slammed back against the wall. His hand went to the knife, then stopped, because there was no heat, no sand, no shouting, just the cabin, just the dark. His breath came faster now. He turned, scanning corners again. Clear. Always clear. He forced himself to stand still. Count. 1, 2, 3. The sound faded, left him in the quiet again. Bruno had risen. He stood facing Caleb, not the door this time, watching him. Caleb's jaw tightened. I'm good, he muttered. Bruno didn't move, didn't believe him. Caleb exhaled slowly, lowering himself back into the chair. His hands rested on his knees, fingers flexing once, then still. The cabin settled again around them, but something had shifted. Inside him, outside, both. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time didn't hold steady anymore. And then Bruno's head snapped toward the door. Instant, silent. Caleb followed the movement, listened. There it was again, that sound, faint, low. Not wind, not steps, a drag. From the ground. Caleb didn't reach for the knife this time. He reached for the flashlight. His thumb clicked it on. A sharp beam cut through the darkness as he moved to the door. Bruno stayed close, right at his leg. Caleb opened the door slowly. The beam swept across the yard, empty, still. Then, it stopped, right at the spot. The place where the slab lay buried again under loose dirt. The ground had shifted, not much, just enough. The soil had sunk slightly along one edge, like something beneath it had moved. Caleb stepped out slowly. The cold hit him again. Sharper this time. Bruno stayed pressed against him. Now, they moved together, step by step, until they stood over the spot again. Caleb lowered the beam. The light traced the edge of the dirt, then the seam beneath it. And for a moment, he thought he imagined it. But Bruno didn't. The dog let out a low, steady growl. Caleb crouched slowly. The flashlight trembled just slightly in his hand, because now he could see it clearly. The dirt along the seam was no longer packed. It had split, just a fraction, barely enough to notice, but enough. Enough to tell him one thing. The slab hadn't been disturbed from above. It had shifted from below. Caleb didn't speak, didn't breathe. He just stared at that thin, dark line opening where there had been none before. And for the first time, the question changed. It wasn't who buried it. It wasn't what it was, and it was something else entirely. Something colder, something heavier. Something that settled deep in his chest and didn't move. What was on the other side? And whether it had just noticed him. Caleb didn't move. Not right away. The beam of the flashlight held steady on that thin, uneven line where the soil had shifted. The crack wasn't wide, barely enough slide a fingertip into, but it hadn't been there before. That was enough. Bruno's growl stayed low and constant, vibrating through his chest like a warning Caleb didn't need explained. Caleb exhaled slowly through his nose. Think, don't react. His body wanted to move, to dig, to open it, and clear whatever was down there. That was instinct, and instinct got people killed. He straightened slowly, the light lifting off the ground and sweeping once across the yard, then the tree line. Nothing moved, but now the silence felt occupied. Like something had taken a breath and was waiting. Caleb backed up a step, then another. Inside, he said quietly. This time Bruno didn't hesitate. He didn't sleep again. But this night wasn't like the last. There were no rotor echoes, no phantom commands, just a steady, grounded awareness. Something had changed, and it wasn't just in his head. Caleb sat at the table now instead of the chair, a map spread out in front of him. Not of the land, but of the property boundaries he'd memorized when he first bought the place. Old habit. Know your AO, know your exits. He marked the spot roughly with a pen, then circled it, then marked the tree line where he'd found the prints, then drew a line between them. And his eyes lingered on that line longer than they should have. Approach vector. Bruno lay nearby, head up now, not even pretending to rest. Every so often his ears twitched, tracking something Caleb couldn't hear, or maybe didn't want to. Caleb leaned back in the chair, rubbing a hand over his face. You felt it, too, he muttered. Bruno didn't answer. Didn't need to. Morning didn't bring relief. It brought clarity, and clarity made it worse. Caleb stepped outside before the sun had fully crested the ridge, tools already in hand. Shovel, crowbar, and this time a coil of rope. Bruno moved ahead of him, stopping at the site and turning back once, checking. Caleb nodded once. Yeah. The dirt had settled further overnight. The crack was still there, wider now, not by much, but enough that the seam looked less like a line and more like a boundary. Caleb set the shovel into the ground again. No hesitation this time. If something had shifted, he needed to see it. The first layer came off quickly. Loose soil peeled back with each push. Bruno paced once, then stopped again, never stepping too close to the edge. Caleb worked methodically, clearing a full perimeter around the slab, widening, deepening, revealing. The shape emerged again, cleaner now, undeniable. Not a slab, a door. And the groove along the edge, it wasn't just a seam, it was a frame. Caleb crouched, brushing dirt away from the lower side. There. A small gap, just enough to see into. He angled the flashlight and lowered the beam into the opening. The light disappeared, swallowed. No reflection. No visible bottom. Only darkness, deep and seemingly bottomless. Caleb held the light steady, waiting for it to hit something. Anything. It didn't. His grip tightened slightly on the flashlight. "That's not shallow," he said under his breath. Bruno let out a sharp breath behind him. Not a bark, just tension. Caleb leaned a little closer, and that's when he felt it. Air. Cold. Not the kind that came from shaded ground or mountain wind. This was different. It moved upward, slow, steady, like something exhaling from below. Caleb pulled back immediately. His body shifted without thinking. Weight dropping, stance tightening, clear the space. Bruno stepped forward instantly, placing himself between Caleb and the opening. Caleb didn't argue, didn't command him back. He let the dog hold that position, because for once, the instinct wasn't his. It was Bruno's. And it was right. Caleb stood there for a moment, watching the thin gap, waiting for movement, for sound, for anything. Nothing came. Just that faint, steady, cold breath from below. He grabbed the crowbar again and wedged it into the seam. This time it slid deeper, easier. The ground had shifted enough to loosen the edge. Caleb paused, measured, then applied pressure. The metal groaned softly against the stone. For a second, nothing. Then a shift, barely there, but real. Bruno snapped his head toward Caleb, a sharp warning sound leaving his throat. Caleb stopped immediately, froze, listening. The ground didn't move again. The air didn't change. But something in that single shift had told him enough. This door wasn't sealed tight anymore. It was resting, balanced, and waiting for the wrong kind of force. Caleb slowly eased the crowbar back out. "No," he muttered, "not like this." He stepped away from the edge, looked at the rope in his hand, then back at the opening. He wasn't going to force it, not blindly. He anchored the rope to the porch support behind him, testing the tension, then looped the other end through a notch along the edge of the slab. Not perfect, but enough. Distance, leverage, control. Bruno watched every movement, silent, focused. Caleb stepped back, taking up the slack. He braced his feet against the dirt, pulling slowly. The rope tightened. The slab didn't move. He adjusted his stance, pulled again, harder. The rope creaked. The ground shifted slightly beneath his boots. Then another sound. Not from the rope, not from the stone. From below. It was a faint scrape. Deep. Distant. Caleb's grip froze. Bruno lunged forward, teeth catching the rope, pulling back, not helping, stopping him. Caleb released immediately. The rope slackened. The sound from below stopped. Silence returned, heavy, complete. Caleb stared at the opening, then at Bruno. The dog didn't let go of the rope right away. He held it for a second longer, then released it slowly, stepping back, breathing hard now. Caleb swallowed once. "That wasn't us," he said quietly. The words didn't sit right, because he knew something had responded. Not moved randomly, not shifted from weight. Responded. He stepped forward again, slower this time, crouched at the edge, lowered the flashlight once more. The beam cut into the darkness, and for just a fraction of a second, he thought he saw something. Not a shape, not a figure, just a surface. Too smooth, too even, far below. Then it was gone. Or maybe it had never been there. Caleb pulled the light back. His hand was steady, but his breathing wasn't. Bruno stood close again now, pressed against his side. Not guarding the hole anymore, guarding him. Caleb sat back on his heels, staring at the ground, at the door, at the thing that wasn't supposed to be here. "This isn't just buried," he said quietly. Bruno didn't move. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. It was closed. The wind returned again, softer this time. Moving across the clearing, through the trees. Carrying that same hollow sound. Only now, it didn't sound like wind at all. It sounded like something passing through a space that shouldn't exist. Caleb stood slowly. His decision settled in without words. He wasn't opening it. Not yet. Not without understanding what he was dealing with. He grabbed the shovel again and began pushing dirt back toward the opening. Not sealing it, just covering enough to hide the gap. To buy time. Bruno stayed close, watching, waiting. As the earth slid back into place, covering the edge, covering the seam, Caleb didn't feel relief. He felt something else, something colder. Because now he knew this wasn't just something he had found. It was something he had disturbed. And whatever lay beneath that stone had already answered once. It wouldn't stay quiet forever. Caleb didn't touch the ground again that day. He left the dirt loosely packed over the seam, just enough to disguise the gap without sealing it. A temporary fix. A pause. Not an end. He stood there for a long time after finishing, shovel resting against his leg, eyes fixed on the spot. Bruno stayed close, not pacing anymore, just watching, waiting. Caleb finally turned away. "All right," he said quietly. "We do this right." By afternoon, the cabin looked different. Not cleaner, not safer, prepared. Caleb moved through it with a rhythm that hadn't been there before, not since he left the service. Check gear, check exits, check sightlines. The old habits came back fast. He laid everything out on the table: flashlight, spare batteries, rope, gloves, knife, a small pry bar, a faded headlamp he hadn't used in years. He hesitated before picking up the headlamp. For a second, dust, heat, and a tunnel carved through broken concrete. Clear left. Clear. Caleb blinked. The cabin snapped back into place. He exhaled slowly, picked up the headlamp anyway. Bruno watched him from the doorway, ears tilted slightly forward, not anxious, just aware. Caleb clipped the lamp into place and tested the beam. Clean, strong. He nodded once, then grabbed the rope. Dusk came early in the mountains. By the time Caleb stepped outside again, the sky had already begun to dim, shadows stretching long across the clearing. Wrong time. He knew it. You didn't enter unknown ground at night. You didn't move without visibility. You didn't walk into something you couldn't control. But something in him, something deeper than training, was pushing him forward. Not curiosity, not exactly, more like unfinished business. And Bruno stepped ahead of him, then stopped, looked back, waiting. Caleb gave a small nod. "Stay close." The dirt came off faster this time. Caleb worked in silence, clearing the edge of the slab again, exposing the seam, the gap. The air came up from below immediately, cold, steady, unnatural. Bruno stayed back this time, not like before. He didn't try to block Caleb. He didn't step forward. He just watched, tense, ready. Caleb secured the rope again, anchoring it to the same post. But this time he didn't pull. He crouched at the edge instead, studying the gap, measuring. His eyes traced the interior darkness, trying to catch depth, distance, structure. Nothing clear. Just that same endless black. He lowered the flashlight slowly, angling it down. The beam cut through the opening, and this time it hit something. Not far, not deep, closer than before. Caleb's eyes narrowed. He shifted the angle. The light revealed it fully. Stone, not natural. Walls, vertical, carved, a shaft. Not a pit, not a cave, a constructed descent. Caleb's grip tightened on the flashlight. "That's not random," he muttered. Bruno let out a low breath. Caleb stood slowly. Decision made. He looped the rope around his waist, tightening the knot with practiced hands, checked the anchor again, pulled once, twice, secure. He looked down at Bruno. "Stay." The dog didn't move, didn't argue, but his eyes didn't leave Caleb. Caleb stepped onto the slab, tested his weight. The stone held. He shifted toward the gap, lowered himself slowly, feet finding the edge, then sliding down until he was suspended. The cold air wrapped around him immediately. Different down here. He lowered himself another foot, then another. Boots touched stone. Solid. Level. He released the rope slightly, letting more slack feed through his hands, then stopped. Listened. Nothing. He turned on the headlamp. The beam spread wider than the flashlight, illuminating the narrow shaft around him. Stone walls. Smooth. Too smooth. Marks ran along the surface, faint carvings, repeating shapes, same pattern as above, but clearer, deeper, intentional. Caleb's breath slowed, controlled. He shifted his stance, tested the ground. Stable. He unhooked the rope from his waist, keeping it loose in one hand, then took a step forward. The passage opened, not wide, but enough. The ceiling rose slightly, giving him space to stand fully upright. Caleb moved slowly, keeping one hand near the wall, the other holding the light. Clear left, clear right. Corners first. Always corners. The air grew colder as he moved deeper. Not damp, not stale, just still, too still. He paused, listening again. And then, a sound behind him. Not outside. Not above. Inside the passage. A faint shift. Like stone. Brushing against stone. Caleb turned instantly, light snapping back toward the entrance. Nothing. Just the shaft, the rope hanging still, no movement, no change. But his pulse had already spiked. He held the position, counted. 1, 2, 3. Nothing followed. He turned back, continued forward. The passage sloped slightly downward now. Gradual, controlled, not natural, deliberate. Caleb's boots echoed softly against the stone, each step too loud in the silence. He slowed, adjusted, less pressure, quieter. Bruno's absence pressed at the back of his mind. The dog should have been here, should have followed, but he hadn't. That meant something. Caleb reached the end of the passage and stopped. The beam of the headlamp revealed it slowly. A chamber. Not large, but not small either. Enough space to stand, to move, to gather. The walls were lined with carvings, same symbols, repeating, layered over each other. And in the center, something else. Not treasure, not equipment, a shape, low, rectangular, stone. Caleb stepped closer, each movement slower than the last, his breathing quiet, measured. He circled slightly, keeping distance, then angled the light downward, and saw it clearly. A slab, smaller than the one above. But the same design, the same structure. Another door, sealed. Caleb's jaw tightened. Not a tomb, he whispered. Bruno's absence felt louder now. The silence pressed harder, because now he understood something. This wasn't the entrance. It was a barrier. And whatever this place was, it didn't end here. It went deeper. Behind that second door, Caleb crouched slowly. The carvings around it were different, sharper, more aggressive. Lines crossing, repeating patterns broken by jagged marks, warnings. Even without understanding them, he recognized their intent. He reached out, then stopped. His hand hovered inches above the surface. The air here felt different, heavier, like pressure before a storm. Behind him, a sound. Not stone. Not movement. A low breath. Close. Caleb turned fast. Light, snapping back. Nothing. Empty passage. Still rope. No movement. But his chest had already tightened. Because it hadn't come from behind. It had come from the door, the one in front of him. Caleb slowly turned back. The slab hadn't moved. The carvings hadn't changed, but something felt closer now. Aware. He stood. Stepped back once, then again. Decision cutting through instinct. Not today. Not blind. Not unprepared. He grabbed the rope again and moved quickly, but controlled back toward the shaft. No running, no panic. Just movement. Up, out, away. When Caleb pulled himself back into the open air, the sky had darkened fully. Bruno was there, right at the edge, waiting. The dog stepped forward immediately, pressing against him, checking. Caleb placed a hand on his head. "Yeah," he said quietly, and Bruno let out a breath. But he didn't relax. Caleb looked back down at the opening, then at the forest, then at the mountain beyond. "This isn't over," he said. The wind moved again through the trees, soft, hollow, carrying that same sound. Only now, it didn't feel distant anymore. It felt like it had followed him up, and it wasn't done, not even close. Caleb didn't go back down that night. He covered the opening again, more carefully this time. packed the dirt tighter, placed loose rocks along the edges to disguise the shift, then scattered pine needles over the surface. Field concealment. Quick, imperfect, enough. Bruno stayed close the entire time, never turning his back to the tree line. Neither did Caleb. Morning came with a hard light and a colder edge, now the kind that made everything feel sharper than it should. Caleb stood on the porch, mug in hand, watching the clearing. Nothing had changed. And that was the problem. The ground looked normal again. The forest stood still. The world had reset itself like nothing had happened. But Caleb knew better. He had been inside, he had seen it, and whatever was down there was real. He took a slow sip of coffee, then set the mug down without finishing it. "All right," he muttered. He grabbed his keys. Bruno's ears lifted immediately. "We're not staying blind." The drive down the mountain took nearly an hour. Gravel roads gave way to cracked pavement, then to a narrow stretch of highway that cut through open land like a scar. Caleb didn't turn on the radio, didn't need noise. His mind was already loud enough. The shaft, the carvings, the second door, and that sound. He tightened his grip on the wheel slightly. Not fear, not yet, just pressure. Beside him, Bruno lay low, head resting near the door, but his eyes stayed open, watching, tracking. Even here, the town was small. One gas station, one diner, one office building that doubled as everything else. Caleb parked outside the county records office. He didn't go inside right away, sat there for a moment, thinking. Then he stepped out. Bruno stayed in the truck, reluctantly. Inside, the air smelled like paper and dust, old wood, stillness. A woman behind the desk looked up briefly, then back down at her work. Caleb didn't waste time. "Looking for land records?" he said. She pointed him toward a row of filing cabinets. "Everything's organized by section." "You know your plot number?" Caleb nodded. He did. He always did. It didn't take long. The files were thin, too thin. Caleb flipped through them, eyes scanning quickly. Purchase history, ownership records, basic survey notes. Nothing unusual, nothing detailed. Then he stopped. One page, different paper, older, faded. He pulled it out carefully. The header was barely readable. Survey addendum. No date, no signature, just coordinates. And a note, brief, handwritten. Subsurface irregularity, non-geological, depth unknown. Further excavation not advised. Caleb stared at it. Non-geological not advised. His jaw tightened slightly. He looked up. "Anyone else ever ask about this section?" he said. The woman didn't look up this time. "Not that I remember." Caleb nodded once and folded the page back into place, but not before memorizing the coordinates. He was halfway out the door when he saw her, standing just outside. Not local. That was the first thing. Wrong posture. Wrong clothes. Clean. Too clean for this place. She wasn't looking at the building. She was looking at him. Direct. Calm. Measured. Caleb stopped just short of the door. Waited. She didn't move. Didn't look away. He stepped outside. Closed the door behind him. "You've been out on the Turner property," she said. Not a question. Caleb didn't answer right away. He studied her instead. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Sharp eyes. Steady stance. Not military but trained. Different kind. "Who's asking?" Caleb said. She gave a small nod. "Dr. Hannah Reeves." No hand extended, no smile, just the name. Caleb held her gaze. "And?" She tilted her head slightly. "You dug something up." Caleb's expression didn't change. "You're making a guess." She shook her head once. "No," she said. "I'm not." A pause. Wind moved lightly through the street. Bruno shifted inside the truck, watching. Hannah glanced toward the vehicle, noticed, then back to Caleb. "That area," she said. "It's not mapped properly. It never was." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then how do you know about it?" Another pause, then, "Because I've been looking for it." The words landed quietly, but they stayed. Caleb didn't move, didn't react. "Looking for what?" he asked. Hannah stepped a little closer. Not threatening, but not casual, either, for something that shouldn't be there. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear, but recognition. He glanced briefly toward the truck. Bruno had lifted his head now, focused, then back to her. "You found something," she said. Again, not a question. Caleb held her gaze for a long second, then shook his head once. "No." Hannah watched him, studied him, then nodded slowly. "Then you will." She turned to leave, took 2 steps, stopped. "Whatever it is," she added without turning back, "it doesn't belong here." Caleb didn't answer. She walked away, didn't look back. Caleb stood there for a moment longer, then moved. Fast, back to the truck. He opened the door. Bruno sat up immediately. "What?" Caleb said quietly. The dog didn't look at him. He was staring past Caleb, across the street. Caleb turned. There, a vehicle, parked wrong. Engine off, but fresh dust still settling around the tires. Someone had arrived recently, and they weren't getting out. Caleb's eyes locked on it. Seconds passed, nothing moved. Then, the engine turned over. The vehicle pulled away slowly, too slowly. Not casual. Measured. Watching. Caleb didn't follow. Didn't react. He just stood there until it disappeared down the road. Then he got in the truck. Bruno didn't settle this time. He stayed upright, alert. The drive back felt longer. He didn't take the main turn. Took a side road instead. Looped once, then again. Checking. Watching. Nothing followed. But that didn't mean anything. When the cabin came into view, Caleb slowed. The clearing looked the same, too the same. Bruno's posture changed instantly, rigid, forward. Caleb parked, but didn't get out, and he watched, counted, listened. Then he stepped out, slow, controlled. The air felt colder, even in daylight. He moved toward the spot. Stopped halfway. Something was off. Not the ground, not the trees. Something smaller, subtle. He crouched, looked closer. Footprints, fresh, not his, not from yesterday. New. Close to the spot. Then, circling away. Not random. Searching. Caleb's chest tightened. He stood slowly. Looked toward the forest. Then toward the cabin. Then back to the ground. "We're not alone," he said quietly. Bruno let out a low, steady growl. Caleb didn't reach for his knife. Not yet. He just stood there thinking. Because now the problem wasn't just what was under the ground. It was who else wanted it, and why. Behind him, the wind moved through the trees again, carrying that same hollow sound. Only now, it didn't feel distant. It felt shared, like whatever was down there and whatever was out there were already connected, and he was standing right in the middle of both. Caleb didn't rush forward. He didn't move at all. He just stood there in the clearing, eyes locked on the fresh tracks in the dirt, letting the silence settle around him again. The prints weren't sloppy, not a hiker, not someone wandering. The spacing was even, weight balanced, steps placed with intent, someone who knew how to move without being heard. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. He'd seen this before. Different country. Same pattern. Bruno shifted closer, pressing against his leg. The low growl hadn't stopped. Caleb lowered his voice. Easy. The dog didn't relax, didn't break focus, so Caleb crouched again, studying the tracks. Boot tread, modern, not worn down, fresh. He traced the direction with his eyes. They didn't go straight to the slab. They circled it, wide, like whoever made them didn't want to get too close. Didn't trust it. Caleb stood slowly, turned, scanned the perimeter. Left ridge, right slope, tree line. Same routine, same discipline. But now it wasn't just him doing it. Somewhere out there, someone else was watching the same ground, measuring the same space, thinking the same thoughts. Bruno suddenly stepped forward, fast, then stopped, frozen, ears locked forward, eyes fixed on the tree line. Caleb didn't ask, didn't question. He moved. Low, controlled, closing the distance between himself and the edge of the clearing. Every step placed carefully, while the forest waited, dark, still, and then movement. Barely there. A shift between two trunks. Caleb stopped instantly. The world narrowed. Everything else dropped away. Just that space, that gap, that flicker of motion. He didn't draw the knife, didn't call out. He waited. Seconds stretched. Nothing. Then a figure. Not fully visible. Just enough. A shoulder, a sleeve, then gone. Caleb's breath slowed. Not panic. Focus. Bruno let out a sharp, low bark. 1. The kind he used for warning. The forest didn't answer, but the silence changed. Caleb took one step forward, then stopped. No pursuit. Not blind. Not without advantage. He turned slightly, angling himself so he could see both the tree line and the clearing behind him. 2 fronts, never one. Bruno moved with him, mirroring the shift. But then a sound. From behind, close. Caleb spun, fast. The cabin door, slightly open. It hadn't been. Caleb's pulse hit once, hard, then leveled. He moved back toward the cabin, faster now, but still controlled. Bruno stayed tight at his side. No hesitation, no distraction. The door creaked softly as Caleb pushed it open the rest of the way. Inside, nothing looked touched. Table, chair, gear, all where he left it. But something felt wrong. The air, the space, like someone had stood there. Recently, Caleb stepped in slowly, eyes moving. Corners, floor, windows. Clear, but not clear, not fully. He moved to the back room, checked, nothing, then turned back toward the main space. Bruno stepped in behind him, then stopped. Dead still. The dog's head turned slowly toward the floor. Not the door, not the window, the floor. Caleb followed the line. His eyes landed on it instantly. A faint trail, dirt, tracked in, not from him, not from Bruno, different pattern, boot. Fresh. Leading toward the back wall, toward the spot where Caleb had stored his gear. The rope, the tools. Caleb's jaw tightened. Someone had been inside, not searching everything, not tearing the place apart, just looking, confirming. He crouched, touching the edge of the print. Still loose, still recent. Minutes, not hours. Bruno's growl returned. Low, dangerous. Caleb stood slowly, then a sound. Outside. Engine. Both of them turned. Caleb moved fast, this time. Out the door. Across the clearing. Just in time to see it. A vehicle. Black. Moving between the trees at the far edge of the property. Not on a road, on cutting through terrain that shouldn't be driven. It didn't stop, didn't slow, just moved. Then vanished behind the ridge. Caleb didn't chase. He stood there, breathing steady, watching the space where it disappeared. Bruno barked once more, sharp, then stopped. Caleb exhaled slowly. They're not hiding, he said quietly. Bruno didn't respond. He didn't need to. Caleb looked back at the ground, at the slab, then at the cabin, then at the forest. They're watching. The realization settled in fully now. Not a guess, not a possibility. A fact. Someone knew. Someone had followed the same trail, seen the same signs, and they weren't waiting, they were moving. Bruno stepped in front of him, blocking, not aggressively, just enough. Caleb looked down at the dog. For a moment, the forest, the tracks, and the door beneath the ground fell away. There was only Caleb and the animal that had never once hesitated, never once left. Caleb reached down, resting his hand briefly on Bruno's head. You're not wrong, he said quietly. Bruno held his gaze, then turned. Back toward the slab, back toward the ground. Caleb followed. The dirt still held. The covering hadn't been disturbed, not yet, but now that didn't matter, because the threat wasn't just below, it was around him, closing in. And for the first time since he arrived, Caleb wasn't deciding whether to open the door. He was deciding whether he could afford not to. The wind moved again through the trees, long, low, carrying that same hollow tone. But this time it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like something counting, waiting, timing. And whatever was coming next wasn't going to give him time to think. Only time to choose. Caleb didn't hesitate anymore. By the time the wind died down, he was already moving. Not fast, not reckless, decisive. He stepped into the cabin, grabbed the headlamp, the crowbar, the rope. No checking this time, no second pass. Everything he needed was already where it should be, prepared. He stepped back outside. Bruno was waiting, already at the edge of the clearing, already facing the spot. Caleb walked past him. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. The dog fell in beside him anyway. The dirt came off faster than before. Caleb didn't try to be quiet now, didn't try to hide it. If they were watching, let them watch. Each shovel strike cut deeper, exposing the slab again, clearing the seam. The thin line that had shifted overnight opened again. The air rose immediately. Colder now, sharper, like something beneath had woken up fully. Bruno backed away, not slowly this time, quick, 3 steps, then stopped. His body lowered slightly, not submission, readiness. Caleb didn't look at him. He drove the crowbar into the seam again. This time it slid in, deep, too easily. Caleb paused. Just for a second. Then pushed. The stone shifted. A clear sound, this time. Heavy. Final. Bruno barked, sharp, urgent. Caleb didn't stop. He leaned harder into the bar. The slab moved again. A fraction. Then another. The seam widened. The ground trembled just enough to feel through his boots. Then it stopped. Not because Caleb stopped, because something resisted. From below, Caleb froze. His breath caught once and then steadied. Not a hinge. He muttered. Not just a door. Something holding it shut. He stepped back, grabbed the rope, looped it tight around the exposed edge. No more testing, no more guessing. He braced himself and pulled. The rope strained. The stone groaned. Bruno lunged forward, grabbed Caleb's sleeve, and pulled back hard. Not helping. Stopping him. Caleb jerked free. Back, he snapped. Bruno didn't let go. For a split second they locked. Then Caleb ripped his arm free. The rope tightened again. Caleb pulled hard. Everything in his body locked into the motion. And then the resistance gave. Not gradually. All at once. The slab shifted, lifted, then dropped open with a deep hollow sound that echoed up from below. Bruno jumped back instantly. A low panicked sound broke from his chest. Caleb staggered 1 step forward, then caught himself. The opening yawned wide now. Not a seam, not a crack. A full entrance. Dark. Still. Breathing. The air that came out wasn't just cold anymore. It was wrong. Flat. Dead. Like something that had been sealed too long. Caleb stood at the edge. Didn't move. Didn't speak. Behind him, Bruno paced once, then twice, then stopped again, refusing to come closer. Caleb lowered the light slowly. The beam cut into the opening, down the shaft, past the walls, into the passage. Nothing had changed, and everything had, because now it was open, fully. Whatever had held it shut was gone. Caleb swallowed once, then stepped forward. The descent felt different this time. Not cautious, not exploratory. Committed. Caleb dropped down into the shaft, boots hitting stone with a sharper echo than before. The sound traveled farther, deeper, like the space below had opened wider than it should. He didn't wait, didn't hesitate. He moved, fast, controlled, down the passage. The carvings passed him on both sides, sharper now in the light, more aggressive in their shapes. Not patterns anymore. Warnings. He reached the chamber, stopped. The second door stood where it had before. But something was different. Caleb stepped closer. The carvings around it had changed, not physically, but the way they caught the light. The lines looked deeper, sharper, like they had been uncovered. He crouched slowly, studied them. Same symbols, same repeating shapes. But now there were breaks in the pattern. Cuts across the lines. Interruptions. More like something had been marked over, corrected, or sealed. Caleb's hand hovered over the surface. The air pressed against him. He could feel it now. Pressure, weight, not physical, something else. Behind him, a sound. Not distant, not subtle, close. Caleb turned instantly. Nothing, just the passage, just the shaft above. But the sound hadn't come from behind. It had come from the door, right in front of him. A low shift, a breath, from the stone itself. Caleb's jaw tightened. "This is wrong," he said quietly. Bruno barked above, sharp, urgent, closer to panic than before. Caleb didn't look up. He stared at the door, at the surface, at the faint line along its edge, a seam, just like the one above, but thicker, stronger, deliberate. He reached out, stopped, and then pressed his palm flat against the stone, and everything broke. Not the door, not the chamber. Him. The world snapped sideways. Sand, heat, smoke. Hold position. Gunfire cracked in the distance. Dust filled his lungs. A body hit the ground beside him. "Turner." Caleb jerked back violently. The chamber slammed back into place. Cold, silent, dark. His hand ripped away from the stone. His breath came fast now. Too fast. Not controlled. Not steady. Bruno barked again from above. Closer now. Desperate. Caleb forced himself to breathe. 1, 2, 3. Focus. He looked at the door again. It hadn't moved, hadn't opened, but something had happened. Not outside. Inside him. Triggered, pulled out. Like the place itself had reached into him and found something it could use. Caleb stepped back. Slowly. Then another step. Then another. He didn't turn his back on it. Didn't break eye contact. Not until he reached the shaft. Then he moved. Fast. Up. Out. Away. He pulled himself onto the surface hard, breathing heavier than he should have. Bruno was there immediately, pressing into him, checking. Caleb dropped to one knee, one hand braced against the dirt, the other gripping Bruno's fur. "I'm good," he muttered. But the words didn't hold. Bruno didn't believe him, didn't relax. Caleb looked back at the opening. The slab lay fully open now, no longer sealed, no longer contained. The wind moved again through the clearing, but this time it didn't carry a hollow sound. It carried nothing, complete silence. Caleb stood slowly, eyes fixed on the hole. "We shouldn't have opened that," he said. But Bruno didn't move, didn't look away. Because now it wasn't just something buried. It wasn't just something watched. It was something released. And whatever had been sealed down there had felt him, had touched him, and it wasn't done, not even close. Caleb didn't close the entrance. He couldn't. Not because he didn't want to, but because something in him knew it wouldn't matter anymore. Once opened, it didn't just go back. He stood at the edge of the hole, breathing steady again. But not calm, not settled. Bruno stayed pressed against his leg, body tight, eyes locked on the darkness below. Neither of them looked away. For a long time, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was listening. Caleb moved first, not away, back, toward the cabin. He needed distance, needed space to think. Bruno followed instantly, but he kept turning his head back toward the opening, like something might climb out the second they looked away. Inside, Caleb didn't sit, didn't slow down. He moved through the cabin with purpose. Flashlight, checked, knife, already in place, a heavier pry tool added. He paused at the door, looked back toward the clearing. The hole, still there, still open, still wrong. Bruno stepped forward, blocked him, not aggressively, just enough. Caleb looked down at him. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I know." The second descent was faster, not reckless, but no hesitation now. Caleb dropped into the shaft, boots hitting stone harder than before. The echo carried farther, deeper, like the space had widened, like something had made room. He didn't stop, didn't scan the walls this time. He moved straight down the passage, but Bruno didn't follow. The dog stayed above, pacing, watching, waiting. The chamber opened again, but it didn't feel the same. Caleb stepped in, and stopped. The air had changed. Not colder, heavier, thicker, like it resisted movement, like it noticed him the moment he crossed the threshold. Caleb's shoulders tightened slightly. He didn't speak, didn't breathe deeper. He just stood there, listening. Then he moved toward the second door. Slow, controlled. His light swept across the carvings. They weren't just patterns anymore. Now that he stood close, they told something. Not words, not language he understood, but repetition, figures, shapes, something being placed, something being sealed, something being kept. Caleb crouched near the edge. His hand hovered again. He didn't touch it this time. No, not yet. Behind him a sound, closer than before. Not from the passage, not from above. From inside the chamber. Caleb turned. Light snapped across the space. Nothing. Empty. But the sound had been there. A faint shift, like weight settling. He turned back to the door. His breathing stayed steady, but his chest tightened, because now he knew he wasn't alone down here. Not exactly. The edge of the second slab had a break in it. Small. Subtle. But real. Caleb noticed it immediately. Different from before. Like something had chipped the surface from inside. He leaned closer, examined the line. The stone around it wasn't worn, it was fractured. Pressure. From the other side. Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's not old," he whispered. Bruno barked above. Sharp. Urgent. Caleb didn't answer. He reached down, pressed the tip of the pry tool into the fracture. Tested it. The stone didn't move, but something inside it responded. Not a shift, not a crack. A feeling, like pushing against something that wasn't just material. Caleb pulled back instantly. His breath caught once, then steadied again. Focus. He adjusted his position, tried a different angle, applied pressure again. This time the fracture widened. Just a fraction, but enough. And from that opening, something came out. Not a shape, not a sound, a presence. Caleb felt it first. Before he saw anything. Before anything moved. A pressure in his chest. Like the air had thickened around him. Like something had stepped closer without moving. Bruno barked again. Louder now. Panicked. Caleb ignored it. He leaned closer. The light dropped toward the opening, and for the first time he saw inside. Not clearly, not fully, just a glimpse. Stone, not natural, arranged, ordered, and something else. Marks, scratches, deep, repeated, not random, not erosion, deliberate. Like something had tried over and over to get out. Caleb froze. His grip tightened on the tool. The light trembled slightly, because now he understood. This wasn't a tomb. There were no remains, no offerings, no structure of burial. This was containment, and whatever had been placed here hadn't stayed still. The sound came again, closer, right behind him. Caleb spun, fast, light cutting across the chamber. Nothing. Empty. But the feeling stronger now, like something stood just outside the beam, just beyond what he could see. Caleb's breathing shortened, his muscles tightened, old reflexes firing. Contact. Unknown. Close. Bruno's bark above turned into something else, a sharp yelp. Caleb's head snapped upward. "Bruno!" No answer. Just the echo of movement above. Scraping. Sliding. Then silence. Caleb moved. Fast. No caution now. He backed toward the shaft, eyes still sweeping the chamber. Light cutting through every corner. Nothing visible, everything wrong. He grabbed the rope and pulled himself up hard, faster than before. No control, just speed. He broke the surface and froze. Bruno was on the ground, just a few feet from the opening, breathing hard. One front leg twisted slightly under him. Caleb dropped to his knees instantly. Hey. His hands moved without thinking, checking the leg, the shoulder, the ribs. Bruno flinched, but didn't pull away, didn't growl, just stayed still, trusting. Caleb's jaw clenched. Easy, he muttered. The leg wasn't broken, but something had hit him. Hard. There were marks in the dirt. Not clear. Not clean. Just disruption. Like something had moved fast through the space where Bruno had been standing. Caleb's eyes lifted slowly toward the opening. The hole, still dark, still open, still waiting. His hand stayed on Bruno's side, grounding, anchoring, because now it wasn't just about what was below. It wasn't just about who was watching. It was something else entirely. Something that didn't stay contained. Something that reached, touched, pushed back. Caleb helped Bruno to his feet slowly. The dog leaned into him, but he stood, still ready, still watching, still loyal. Caleb swallowed once. His voice came out lower now, colder. This isn't staying down there. The wind didn't move. The trees didn't answer. But the silence shifted. And for the first time since he arrived, Caleb wasn't dealing with a mystery. He was dealing with something that pushed back. Something that had already marked them. And something that wasn't done. Not even close. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat in the chair by the window, rifle across his lap, boots still on, eyes fixed on the tree line where the darkness seemed just a little too thick. Bruno lay on the floor beside him, awake, breathing shallow but steady. Every few minutes his ears would twitch, tracking something Caleb couldn't hear, or something Caleb didn't want to hear. The cabin felt smaller now, not safer, just contained, like whatever was outside knew exactly where they were, and was waiting. The first light came slow over the mountains, cold blue breaking through the trees. Caleb stood before the sun cleared the ridge, moved quiet, routine. Check the perimeter. Check the entry points. Check the ground. He stepped outside. The air hit him sharp. Clean. Too clean. No wind. No birds. No movement. And then tracks. Not animal. Not boots. Not exactly. Something had moved through the dirt. Near the cabin. Close. Too close. Caleb crouched. Studied it. The pattern wasn't consistent. Weight distributed wrong. Like something had pressed down, then shifted, then dragged. He didn't touch it. Didn't need to. His chest tightened just enough. Contact. Unknown. Recent. He stood slowly, turned, and saw the truck. It was parked just beyond the tree line. Dark. Still. Not his. Bruno growled. Low. Warning. Caleb's body reacted before his mind caught up. Rifle up. Eyes scanning. Angles. Cover. Distance. He moved toward the truck. Step by step. Controlled. The driver's side door opened before he got there. A man stepped out. Older. Gray at the edges. Hands visible. No weapon drawn. But not relaxed either. Measured. Caleb didn't lower the rifle. The man stopped halfway. Left space between them. Morning, he said. Caleb didn't answer. The man glanced past him, toward the clearing. Toward the hole. Then back. His eyes settled on Caleb. You opened it. Not a question. A statement. Caleb's grip tightened slightly. Who are you? The man exhaled once, like he'd expected that. Name's Logan Pierce. A beat passed. Sheriff? Caleb asked. County line runs just west of your ridge, Logan replied. Caleb didn't lower the rifle. Didn't see a badge. Logan nodded. Didn't bring one. Silence. Bruno stepped forward, positioned himself just ahead of Caleb. Still limping slightly. Still ready. Logan noticed. His eyes softened for a second, then hardened again. You need to listen carefully, Logan said. Caleb didn't move. Logan continued anyway. That thing in your ground. He paused, choosing his words. It's not a sight. Caleb's jaw tightened. I figured that out. Logan nodded slowly. Good. He took a step closer. Caleb shifted his stance instantly, rifle tracking. Logan stopped, held position. Then you also know, his voice dropped, that it shouldn't have been opened. Caleb didn't respond, didn't confirm, didn't deny. Logan studied him, then nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly. You know. The wind still hadn't returned. The trees had frozen. like they were waiting, too. Logan glanced toward the forest behind him, then back. I've been watching this land for a long time, he said. Not you. The land. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. Logan continued. My father did it before me. His father before that. A pause. We don't call it guarding. Another pause. But that's what it is. Caleb lowered the rifle an inch. Not much, just enough. And the people in the woods? He asked. Logan's expression changed. Subtle but real. You saw them. Not a question. Caleb nodded once. Logan exhaled slowly. They're not from here, not local. They come when something shifts. Caleb's voice stayed flat. They already knew about it. Logan nodded. Yeah. A longer silence. They've been trying to find it for years. Caleb's grip tightened again, and now they have. Logan didn't answer, didn't need to. Bruno suddenly stiffened, head snapping toward the trees. A sound. Faint. Movement. Logan turned too. His posture changed instantly. No more calm, no more distance. Inside, he said. Caleb didn't argue. They moved, fast, back toward the cabin. Logan didn't hesitate, followed him in like he'd been there before. The door shut, locked, windows checked, lines of sight cleared. Two men, different lives, same instinct. Hold position. The sound came again, closer, branches shifting, weight moving through brush, not hiding anymore. Testing. Caleb moved to the window, low angle, minimal exposure. Logan took the opposite side. They didn't speak, didn't need to. Outside, a figure moved between the trees. Then another, not rushing, not aggressive, just present, watching, waiting. Logan's voice stayed low. They won't come in yet. Caleb didn't look at him. Why? Logan's eyes stayed on the forest. Because they don't know what you opened. A beat. And they don't know what came out. The room went still, heavier than before. Bruno let out a low whine, not fear, recognition, like something nearby, something unseen, had shifted again. Caleb's chest tightened, just enough. He felt it, the same pressure, from the chamber, from the crack, from the thing behind the stone. Logan noticed. His eyes flicked toward Caleb, then toward the floor, then toward the door. You feel it, he said. Caleb didn't answer. Logan nodded anyway. Yeah. A long pause, then. We don't have much time. Caleb finally turned. What happens next? Logan looked toward the clearing, toward the hole, then back at him. His voice dropped lower, more certain. They're not the problem. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then what is? Logan held his gaze. For 5,000 years. He paused, then finished. Nothing got out. Silence. Heavy. Final. Bruno shifted closer to Caleb's leg, leaning into him, grounding him, because now it wasn't about what was buried. It wasn't about who was watching. It wasn't even about the men outside. It was about something older, something that had already pushed back once, something that had already reached, and something that was no longer staying where it was put. Logan stepped toward the door, stopped, looked back. We either close it, he said quietly, or we deal with what happens when it doesn't stay closed. Caleb didn't answer, didn't need to, because for the first time since he arrived, this wasn't just his fight anymore, and whatever was under his land was already moving. Not fast, not loud, but enough. Enough to know this wasn't containment anymore. This was a countdown. Caleb didn't wait. He moved, not toward the door, toward Bruno. The dog was still standing, but barely. Weight shifted off his front leg, breath uneven, eyes still locked on the world outside like he refused to stop doing his job. Caleb crouched, one hand firm against Bruno's chest, grounding, checking, alive, still with him. Stay, Caleb whispered. Bruno didn't sit, didn't lie down. He just pressed closer, closer than before, like he understood something Caleb hadn't said yet. Logan watched them, didn't interrupt, didn't rush, but when he spoke, it cut through everything. If we go back down there, he said, we don't get a second try. Caleb didn't look up. I already used that. Logan nodded once. That's the problem. Outside, the figures hadn't moved closer, but they hadn't left either. They stood between the trees, watching, waiting, patient, like they didn't need to rush, like they knew something Caleb didn't, or worse, like they knew exactly what was about to happen. Caleb stood slowly. His movements weren't rushed, but they were final, decision made. No hesitation left. He grabbed the pry bar again, the rope, the pack. Logan stepped closer. "You sure about this?" Caleb looked at him, not angry, not uncertain, but just clear. "It's already open, a beat, and it already pushed back." Logan held his gaze, then nodded. "Then we close it." They didn't go together at first. Caleb stepped out. Logan stayed just behind him, scanning the tree line, tracking the figures. The moment Caleb crossed the edge of the clearing, everything shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, but enough. The air changed. Pressure built, subtle, but real. Bruno limped forward anyway, staying at Caleb's side, ignoring the pain, ignoring the warning, because that's what he did, because that's who he was. Caleb reached the hole, didn't hesitate, dropped the rope, secured it, tested it, then looked down. The darkness wasn't empty anymore. It wasn't just absence of light. It felt occupied. Caleb exhaled once, steady, then he descended. The tunnel swallowed the light behind him. Logan followed seconds later. Their movements were quiet, precise. Every step deliberate. No wasted motion, no words, just breath, and the sound of rope shifting against stone. The chamber was different, again. Caleb felt it the second his boots hit the floor. The air was heavier now, not just thick, pressing, like it pushed back against every movement. Logan stepped in behind him, paused, then muttered under his breath, "It's closer." Caleb didn't ask what he meant. He already knew. The crack in the second door had widened. Not by much, but enough. Enough to let something through. Not a shape, not something visible, but something that didn't belong. Caleb stepped forward, pry bar in hand. Bruno growled softly behind him, stronger now, despite the injury, despite everything, still protecting, still warning. Caleb stopped just short of the door, didn't touch it, didn't rush. He studied the carvings again, different now. Not because they changed, but because he understood. This wasn't ritual. This wasn't burial. This was instruction. Steps, warnings, sequences, and every single one of them led to the same point. Seal it. Keep it closed. Don't open it. Logan stepped beside him, low voice. "We seal it with weight," he said. "Pressure, same way they did." Caleb nodded once, already moving. They worked without speaking. Stone, debris, anything that could be dragged, lifted, forced into place, blocking, reinforcing, closing. Bruno stayed back, watching the darkness beyond the crack. Not the men, not the movement, the crack. Always the crack. The first shift came fast, a sound from inside. Low, deep, not loud but heavy, like something adjusting its weight. Logan froze. Caleb didn't stop. He shoved another slab into place, locked it, held it. The pressure in the air increased. Harder to breathe, harder to think. Bruno barked. Sharp, urgent. Caleb turned. Just in time. The crack widened. Not from their side. From the inside. Something pushed. Once. Twice. The stone held. Barely. Caleb slammed another piece into place, braced it with everything he had. "Hold it!" Logan snapped. Caleb didn't answer, didn't need to. He pushed. Every muscle locked, every instinct firing, the same instinct that kept him alive before. The same instinct that told him, if this breaks, it doesn't stop. The pressure peaked. Then it stopped. Suddenly. Completely. Like something inside had pulled back. Caleb didn't move, didn't relax, didn't breathe deeper. He waited. Seconds, minutes, time stretched. Then nothing. Silence. Real silence. For the first time since he entered, Logan exhaled slowly. It held. Caleb didn't answer. Not yet. He kept his hand on the stone, feeling, listening, waiting. Then, very slowly, he stepped back. They didn't celebrate, didn't speak. They moved, fast, back toward the rope, back toward the surface. Bruno was already there, waiting. Mine. The moment Caleb reached the top, the air changed again. Lighter, not safe, but quieter. The figures in the trees, gone. No sound, no movement, no trace. Like they had never been there. Caleb dropped to his knees beside Bruno, checked him again, but the dog leaned into him. Tired, but still alert, still watching, always watching. Caleb rested his forehead briefly against Bruno's. No words, didn't need them. Logan stepped up behind them. Looked toward the hole, then toward the trees, then back at Caleb. "You made the right call," he said. Caleb shook his head slightly. "No," he said quietly. "I just made the last one." The wind returned, slow at first, then stronger, moving through the trees, breaking the silence, carrying sound again. Normal, almost. Caleb stood, helped Bruno up. They didn't look back, not at the hole, not at the place beneath it, because they both knew some things didn't need to be seen again. They left before sunset, truck loaded, cabin locked, nothing taken except what mattered. Bruno in the passenger seat, head low, eyes still open. Caleb drove without speaking, didn't turn on the radio, didn't fill the silence, because the silence was finally just silence again. But far behind them, beneath layers of stone, beneath weight and pressure and time, something shifted. Not enough to break, not enough to escape, but enough to remember, enough to wait, and enough to know it hadn't ended. It had only been delayed. The road stretched long and empty beneath Caleb's truck. Wyoming fell behind them mile by mile, pine ridges fading into open plains, mountains shrinking in the rear view until they became nothing more than a dark line against the sky. Caleb didn't look back, not once. Bruno lay across the passenger seat, head resting near Caleb's arm. His breathing had evened out, but every so often, his ears would twitch, reacting to something that wasn't there, or something that was too far away to matter anymore. Caleb kept one hand on the wheel. The other rested lightly against Bruno's side, counting the breaths. Still here, still alive, still with him. They reached the clinic just after nightfall. Small town. Single-story building. Lights still on. A bell rang as Caleb pushed the door open. The smell hit first. Clean, sterile, too bright compared to everything they'd just left behind. A woman behind the counter looked up, then down at Bruno, then back at Caleb. "You're cutting it close," she said, already moving. Caleb didn't answer, didn't explain, didn't need to. She took Bruno gently, led them through. Caleb followed halfway, then stopped, watched. His hands were empty for the first time in days, and suddenly he didn't know what to do with them. Time passed. He didn't check his watch, didn't sit, just stood in the corner, eyes fixed on the door Bruno had disappeared through. Every sound made his shoulders tighten. Every shift of light pulled his focus. Until finally, the door opened. The woman stepped out. Caleb straightened instantly. "He'll be okay," she said. Simple, direct, no build-up, no hesitation. Caleb nodded once. Didn't say thank you. Didn't need to, but something in his chest loosened. Just a little. They stayed the night. Bruno slept. Really slept. For the first time since the mountain, Caleb didn't. He sat beside the bed, watching, listening, not for danger anymore, just for breath. Morning came quiet. Different quiet. Not heavy. Not watching. Just still. Bruno lifted his head slowly. Eyes clear. Focused. Present. Caleb reached down. Bruno leaned into his hand. Same as always. Nothing had changed. And everything had. They didn't go back. Not to the cabin, not to the land. Caleb left it behind without paperwork, without explanation, just keys on a counter, and a name scratched off a map. Logan didn't call. Didn't need to. There was an understanding there now. Unspoken. Final. Weeks passed. Then months. Different place now. Lower elevation. No mountains pressing in. No trees watching from the edges. Caleb found work where he could. Simple. Routine. Nothing that required thinking too far ahead. Bruno stayed close. Closer than before. But stronger now. healing, steady. Sometimes, at night, Caleb would wake. Not to sound, not to movement, just pressure. Faint, distant, like remembering something his body hadn't forgotten. He'd sit up, look around, check the door, check the windows, then rest a hand on Bruno, and wait. It always did. One evening, late, the sun just starting to drop, Caleb sat on the back steps of a small rental house miles away from anywhere that mattered. Bruno lay beside him, head on his boot. The wind moved through dry grass, soft, constant, normal. Caleb looked out at nothing in particular, then down at Bruno. "You did good," he said quietly. Bruno didn't move, didn't need to. He already knew. Far away, back where the mountains cut into the sky, the cabin stood empty. Door shut, windows dark, the clearing untouched, grass slowly reclaiming the disturbed earth. The hole was gone, covered and sealed as if it had never been there. But beneath it, deep, far below where light had ever reached, the stones held, pressed tight, layered, reinforced, holding for now. A faint crack remained, barely visible, thin, hairline, running along the edge of the second door. Dust shifted just a grain, then another, falling, slow, quiet, unnoticed. No sound followed, no movement, no force, just stillness, but not empty, never empty. Because whatever had been placed there, whatever had waited, whatever had pushed back, hadn't stopped. It had adjusted, it had learned. And somewhere in that sealed darkness, something remained, patient, aware, and waiting for the next time someone forgot why it was buried in the first place. If you made it all the way here, I want to ask you something simple. Do you think Caleb made the right choice? Type 1 if you would have sealed it. Type 0 if you would have opened it again. No long comments, just 0 or 1. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, if you felt that tension, that silence, that moment when everything could have gone wrong, hit subscribe, because the next story might be even darker. And next time, we might not close it in time.